if it ever goes down. We know from the waiting list work that's being done, how many additional waivers we're going to need to put on. And we can demonstrate that we can do a long-term cash forecast and what the balances are going to be. Rick threw out another term that we hadn't used before, and that was the safe harbor, instead of calling it a rainy day fund. So what he was saying is, that money that we put back is to cover both known and unknown expenditures. There's a lot of things that could happen that we can't control, but we would have to make the payments. And so he is giving us examples. He gave us 6 talking points. I'm not going to read through all of these, but they're all true points. If you want to read through them, his explanation, that's fine. But waiver rate increases. You know, we were really in agreement with the DSP, the direct service provider increase, because we are hurting for the people to serve the individuals in their homes. So, but there's other waiver services that are occurring that the rate could go up, and even if we agree or don't disagree, we can't stop it. But the association speaks for us, and they're very good about that, but it's going to come to a point that those increases are going to have to go up, or you're not going to have people providing. It's just like transportation. They're talking about increasing that, but if we don't, who's going to provide the trips to the employment, and who's going to provide the trips to the day services? So we have waiver rate increases. Additional rate increases to other Medicaid services. That's going to happen, and we can't really stop it. Current waiting list revisions. They've revised it once. There's nothing saying that it wouldn't be revised again, and the need might be there. So things happen that cost us more. Possible changes to FFP. This is the federal rate. There is absolutely nothing, and how that is calculated is based on poverty across all states in all the states. So we can't control where the state of Ohio falls. Typically, the FFP does not change more than 1%. It's usually actually under 1%. But I just looked, and in between 2010 and now, it has fallen almost 5%. So we're getting better than, there's poverty in other states compared to ours. We can't control that. And Rick was saying a 1% increase in the FFP would cause, what was that, $9 million across the whole state?
Yeah.
So just 1%, $9 million across the whole state. We don't want the FFP to change much drastically, but we can't control that. State funding cuts to local county boards. You know, they have whittled away at our subsidy and other monies that we were getting. Everybody was having to take cuts for many years. They have recently moved a lot of our funds over into our state allocation for Medicaid match, so that they can't keep taking what we were calling the low-hanging fruit. And right now, the only thing we're going to be getting in subsidy, and it's not going to be quarterly, it's going to be once a year, is the money for FSS. It's about $53,000, and that's it. So how do we know they're not going to cut that? We don't know that. It could happen. And privatization. Privatization did help us initially, but as time goes on, it's going to cost us. And right now, we know that a lot of the private providers have not billed everything they could have billed. They're still learning. And we think that they're going to get better. I mean, they're going to have to get better. And so we're going to be billed more because they've been not billing timely or not understanding how to bill. So that's going to pick up. So all of these things we can't control, and we need to have money set aside so that we can pay the Medicaid match, because we are responsible to pay that.
Don't mean to sidetrack. I just want to. So what this will do is this, on our financials, we have a carryover,
Yes.
right? And that's what we're talking about. How much of that carryover to the max, I mean, up to that 40% of the
Yes, we
operating.
can't go over, we can go under as much as we want.
But if we, 2 years in a row, can you, is that is that a per year limitation?
Yes,
Okay, and so it just goes into another fund, a warrant of transfer, okay? And then say, something comes up and we actually need it. Is it an easy move it back out?
yes, we would have to tell them we need
This is a
to pay a Medicaid
presentation
expense.
kind of thing, right? That the carryover that we're showing now in the financials at 9 million, it's gonna be off by whatever your number you said, if we decide to maximize it, 4 million or whatever that one is. It's just gonna say 5 million,
Right,
right?
Mhm.
And so, just from a practical standpoint, all that says is, you know,
the main thing it says is, the commissioner, not the commissioners, but the budget commission cannot roll back a levy.
right, that's what I'm saying. It's just, I mean, technically, I just
It's
ask
smoke,
you.
it's smoke and mirrors.
It is. I just asked you, we could move it back out
Yeah,
in a day,
It's
and then all of a sudden we're back up to 9 million, and then they can take it. Right, we'll do I mean, why wouldn't they do the math?
they can, but they can't consider that. They're allowing us to put away our Medicaid match because if everything else can't be paid here,
Yeah,
this board has to pay the Medicaid match. And it's kind of setting it aside saying, this is the most important thing county board does.
yeah.
Because the state doesn't want to do
Yeah.
it. That's why the state wants us to set it
Yeah.
aside.
And if they ever came to us to say it, that would be part of the explanation you'd say anyways.
Yeah.
Right? Look, here's the stuff that were mandatory, and here are the dollars and that kind of stuff.
This
right?
all happened, if you
Just
think
feels
about it.
like it just so, a lot of work for essentially,
Well, it is, but on one hand, we are now at double-digit county boards that could not pay their Medicaid match. because
But
of
on
poor
that, I
planning.
can say there's double digits that have more than 100% of their operating money too.
You're right, so you got
Again.
both ends of the spectrum,
We
and then
sit-
you've got a budget commission that's trying to roll people back. It's,
and the budget commission is defined as the,
treasurer, prosecuting attorney, and auditor. And I think we do really well, honestly, Marty, because our money is all in the county and they earn interest off of us. I don't know if you've ever heard me say
Yeah.
this.
Mhm.
Whereas a lot of counties put their money in COGS and they keep all the interest. I think ours pretty much trusts us. We're fiscally conservative. We keep ending in I've never heard them breathe a word of that around,
Mhm.
and then just seeing what happened in Sandusky County, I don't know that anybody would want to take it on because the commission tried to roll them back. They had to have this public hearing. And it's because like in Guernsey, one day the superintendent woke up and found out she lost half her levy. They rolled them back and didn't tell them. And you came in 1 month and your financials were totally different.
Mhm.
But Sandusky had public hearings, brought people, fought it tooth and nail with families. I don't want to ever be there where we're
Mhm.
fighting our local government over money, And so, yes, it's still our money. If you add them together, we still have 9 million. It's just saying this money needs to be here because the state, as to Martha's point, 22 counties couldn't pay their Medicaid match, so the state of Ohio had to. And they don't want that. They want county boards paying their Medicaid match. So, yeah.
it's pretty much, the Medicaid match is priority. Once you give a Medicaid waiver to an individual, you cannot take it back.
Right.
Mhm.
And someone has to be responsible to pay that match if a county board can't.
It's the Medicaid match for 1 year. That's the
Yeah.
math.
Yeah.
Right, when it's calculated.
That's what
Yeah.
40% would be our contribution,
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's, as long as, I never want to be
Which
over 100.
is the thought then, hey, okay, you're below that 40% or whatever, or you're below that threshold, you should go out for a levy, right? Isn't that the other option?
Right, you need to be able to get, yes, but then, even if you pass it the very first time you go out for it, which it's not always the case, you still have 18 months before you start collecting.
I would say we might, in finance, talk about just transferring the 1.7 mil to that account that we're gonna be over in our projections. I would never probably come in and ask you to move 4 million. We
No,
don't
I
have
think
to.
40% is way too high.
I do too. I think, you know how we
I can't
were.
believe they threw out 1%.
I
I would have
couldn't
liked
either.
for them to have said, since it takes 18 months to collect your levy, why didn't they say 18 months worth of Medicaid match?
That's the number I was just gonna
Yeah.
suggest. Why don't we, what is the 18 months?
Right, it's a year and a half.
What
of
is
your-
that dollar amount?
I don't know, we'll
equal
figure it out
to?
for finance.
Well, we're meeting
Just under
tomorrow.
2 million probably.
That would be the number
So the
that I was-
1.7 is close to what we
Yeah, and
ended.
we recalculate that annually for our budget.
Yeah, so
So-
we're not gonna come to finance and ask to put all that in there, because I
No,
don't want the
that's
red
crazy.
to appear any sooner either, you know, like on our thinking for a levy, that's not, you know.
The red is mostly about the,
Eating the carryover,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the shortfall from revenues to expense,
Mhm.
right?
yeah.
Right.
Does anybody have, and so really all this then is just if people ask you why there's so much money, that you understand why we have to bank that Medicaid match and why, is there anything else? I mean, the big changes are coming. Our payment on those DSP wage increases will come in 7/1 of 2021 because the state gave us the money, and that's the money they said we could put in this account too.
Right.
So if we ever
It's gonna
see
go
that money, well, that money I would suggest we put in there, because we know that in
Yep.
July of 2021, we have to start paying the 63 cents on the DSP wages.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, that 5-year forecast is going to be in a prescribed format that we have to load to the state, and it's not supposed to come till December. So what I'll be showing you, well, Finance Committee will get, October and November, you'll get how we normally provide the budget pages and the 5-year forecast, but it's going to change in December to, I think you guys should see what we're
Yeah.
giving the state.
Mhm.
So,
It's similar to ours. It's a little more wordy
It's supposed to
in
be
my opinion,
close,
a little
but-
more numbery.
yeah, I'm really not sure everything.
You said 1.7, is that what we're projecting, an increase in the carryover this year?
That's what I thought you said.
That's what I said.
Okay, I heard it tonight. One of
Do you
you.
think the projection is
because-
for 1.7?
Bob asked.
Bob asked, maybe
Okay.
before you walked in.
Yeah, because the budget, it was the 400. This last sheet,
I
this
meant
is
a
budget.
1.7 increase over what we had budgeted. I wouldn't be
Oh,
surprised.
1.7, so it'd
That's a
be a
guess.
positive 1.3.
Yeah,
We're
so,
not eating into the carryover at all.
Yeah, yeah.
so to me, that's like, I don't know, rainy day fund. We made a little extra money this year, put that in there.
It's, we were showing a deficit.
Oh.
Your 1.7 is over your projection.
Yeah.
You were talking about a 440 deficit.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Was it 440? I knew it was.
442,
Yeah.
if this
Yeah.
is from the budget, if
It
this
is, it's the
okay.
one that just passed for 19.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got a lot of things to talk about, and
Yeah, to my point, I'm not gonna recommend 4 million, some crazy number like that,
Right.
seems too high. Any other questions on that? Okay, that's the thing that is like very board finance heavy, the rest, a lot of this other stuff is, waiver kind of stuff. So we're gonna segue, I have the next topic. They wanna make sure that you all have updates on waiver rules that are changing, and a lot of these kind of carry the theme of kind of what we said, waiver changes that are coming that could cost us more money, but also mean differences in services. So the first one we have here is vocational habilitation. And if you remember, we've been talking a lot about Ohio not aligning with the federal government, with CMS, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. And that would be what happened in 15 when we had to transition out of, services, because CMS said boards can't do these two things. So the next big thing they started working on was the vocational habilitation doesn't match the federal definition. Because we're using Medicaid money to pay people to work in sheltered workshops, and that's illegal. Medicaid money cannot be used for that. So they started meeting in August of 2018 and have been working on replacing the vocational habilitation service That is where people work in a sheltered workshop and are getting training to work, and they're paid to do that. To the, if you go down to the first bullet, they want to call it the Basic Employment Skills Training, BEST, B-E-S-T. Don't you think like that's just the most creative little thing? But basically that would have a 24-month time limit where people could work in a workshop. And during that 24 months, they're trained to get a community job and move on. There would be yearly extensions. This is all tentative. It's not approved yet. We're just to give you updates on where the work group is. There would be yearly updates. The board, our staff, could approve those for 3 years, saying, and Tom had just come from a meeting on Amy, which was really helpful because he said, yeah, he just told the OOD lady he knew more than she did. But let's just, Amy's not 50, so Amy's 47, and Amy has to switch to the best service next July. Each year for the next 3 years, the board could say, yep, Amy's good, she can keep having this service, she can keep going to the workshop, she's making progress. But after 3 years, then the department gets to approve it. So a few of us cynics who've been around a little while, me and Cheryl Zimmerly, we're talking and we're like, oh, well, the department will just keep approving it, so what have we caused? And I don't know if they will or they won't. But if you look at the bottom circle bullet, people who are 50 and over, they won't call it grandfathered, but if you've been in a workshop, working in a workshop, making money, and you're over 50, they're going to leave you alone. So that was to keep happy the people whose kids have been going to the workshop. And my one comment is, none of the federal laws ever are what Ohioans want. They're not what we want for our kids. They're really not what we want as professionals, because I've always believed in a continuum. And if, people have, we know some people next door who've tried community employment. They've been bullied. It hasn't worked out. Their mental health is, but we're going to be forced to do it. And we're going to be forced to keep pushing people out of the workshop and into community jobs. And right now in this workforce, it's going pretty well, actually. If Melody was here, it'll be in my newsletter article. 112 people working in the community, the highest we've ever had. I mean, we have people that some of us went, they'll never work in the community, working at least chicken. I mean, things, so, all kinds of great things are happening, and that's a good thing. But there is people, there's some people at the developmental centers that I think should probably always be there. There's probably some people that I always imagine in the sheltered workshop, and some parents who want it that way, and I don't see what's wrong with it. But for right now, and then the other part of that is the 50% wage calculation. You might have remembered us talking about that if you're in a sheltered workshop and you're making 50% or greater of minimum wage, you should not get vocational habilitation, the waiver paying for your service. So they're setting the parameters by which the providers have to track it by the Ohio minimum wage. They have to report it annually to the SSA to be included on their path to employment. But then they don't really say what the SSA is going to do with that. What's it mean if so? Because we have individuals next door that work so good and so high, they make more than minimum wage at piece rate. So the thinking of the federal government is, why in the world it's called sub-minimum wage? If you're making more than minimum wage, why aren't you in the community working? Kind of goes to that same thing. On the back side then, let's see here. There's some other pieces. They do wanted you to know that this is still a potential risk for Ohio. That Medicaid is not supposed to fund this, but they feel like they could argue it. They call it the right size vocational, that 18 to 49-year-olds is what we're targeting. Who knows? The feds could come in and say, close them all. The Department of Labor could say, sub-minimum wage certificates are no longer legal. That's always out there. So, for right now, we have a sheltered workshop, we go with it. And this really affects WeCan too. We have a lot of people that go there, and they pay minimum wage down there, but they bill vocational services on either end. And there is some sheltered workshops, UCO in Union County, who are talking about turning back the waiver dollars and saying we are not going to take waiver dollars because we want people to work and we have enough piece rate, parts, all that. And if you don't take Medicaid dollars, none of this applies. You get to operate like Marimore Industries in the old days. But that's a lot of money to replace, because Marimore Industries gets a lot of money.
That'd be their decision, right?
It would be, yep, not ours.
We wouldn't be able to control it, and it would save county Portsmouth.
Yeah,
They
the only
don't
thing
know.
I would probably be asked is, would you still pay us the 40% of local dollars like we pay now to help us operate it? And there's counties that feel differently about that. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, but would it be legal or not, we'd want to check all that out. Because they'd be giving up their 40% local to what we pay and match. And then they're also looking at increasing some pre-vote watching and in baselines. They're talking about how, Kelly Shuck, who works for Employment First through DOT, and Stacy Collins, they've been over to Miramar Industries. I think it feels like every other month I hear they're over there trying to teach, and down in Auglaize, they do these family meetings because the families were so upset there. Trying to get them to get people in the community and understand that you got to get out of these walls and you got to take people out and you got to expose them to more. So the sad thing is we have like this working wonders through fans, and Sarah just cannot get people from Miramar Industries to bring people, the staff shortages or whatever. So Sarah sets up these great things at like Restore, where 3 or 4 people from the workshop on path 3 or 4, the people who aren't working in the community and need to learn before they do, and then they don't have the staff to send anybody. So we're doing everything we can to try to get people out there exposed to jobs and what to do, but I can't make Miramar Industries take advantage of it either. You know, all we can do is present it. So we've got to figure that. Sarah and I have talked about different ways, but it's really their responsibility. They're the ones, you know, that have to prove they're doing employment first. So that's all the vocab stuff. Any questions about that? Okay, Jana's up with transportation changes. Kind of goes right along with this.
I've got 2 topics, so I'm gonna just pass out the other information down here. This is the first one. And then, this is for my other topic. Okay. We're gonna do waiver transportation first. Okay, so what you have is basically, I just kind of condensed a presentation from Scott Marks at the policy symposium that Martha was referring to that we went to last week. He has kind of led the statewide work group that was formed about 3 years ago, and it was formed because that's when Employment First happened. We became an Employment First state. Also, the settings rule became big, and that's community integration, that individuals should get services in the most natural community-based setting possible. And the major theme through all of that was that transportation was the biggest barrier to get people out in the community, whether it was for employment or for recreation or whatever. So that's why they formed this statewide work group. So how services currently are with transportation, there's 2 different services. Non-medical transportation, you hear us refer to that as NMT. That's your transportation to and from work or a day program. And per trip rate is what most of your providers try to access. It's the higher rate, but you have to have a vehicle that is 9 or more passengers or a modified vehicle, so with a lift or something like that, to access that rate. The other service, waiver service, is homemaker personal care transportation, and that's your transportation that's associated with all of your residential services. So getting people to the store and to Special Olympics, to the bank, that kind of thing. Barriers that they identified to the current services as we have them now is that lack of flexibility in the vehicle type. Not being able to bill community transportation during day services. So right now, how NMT works is you take somebody to day programming, for instance, to Miramar, you're able to bill the to and from. But with the push for community integration to get people out during the day, there's no funding mechanism for that transportation during the day. So that's been identified as a barrier. Rates not being sufficient for all your rural areas. and then just the discrepancy in the rate structure for across the transportation services. So they had 4 major goals. One was to build transportation capacity for employment supports and community supports, increase flexibility of the transportation, incentivize and align NMT with community integration requirements, and then minimize complexity in authorizing and providing the transportation. So out of that, the work group recommended that rates be aligned between the NMT and the HPC transportation. So it's different rate structures now, so they want to align them, have the same rates. Increase funding, especially for those that require a modified vehicle. Give people more flexibility to access and provide transportation. Allow providers to bill during the day. So when they are taking people out into the community during the day, have a mechanism that they can bill, because right now they can't. And then also support people in volunteer positions or post-secondary activities, college. So rule changes that are being proposed, they're not in effect yet, they're being proposed, are to expand NMT to include college activities and volunteer positions. Eliminate the vehicle size and type requirement to access the per trip rate. So they would do away with the 9+ passenger or modified vehicle requirement. They want to implement a new per mile rate structure for both NMT and HPC transportation, and then have an enhanced rate for a modified vehicle. This new per mile rate would be able to be billed concurrently then with any day service that's authorized or HPC service that's authorized. And if billing the modified rate, at least one passenger must require the use of a modified vehicle. And then the last proposed rule change would be to increase the budgets to allow for the per mile community integration miles, which they're looking at the equivalent of about $580 or 1,000 miles. Then some other things going forward, they said that the state budget that was approved does allocate $5.5 million a year to fund these changes for transportation. They're still working on the rule language, so they have a smaller work group working on the rule language, but they told us last week they're still on track for January 1 rule changes, and then rate changes February 1. Although we're hearing some difference.
Didn't Cheryl say she heard July now or something
Yeah.
this week? And
Yeah.
we just heard the budget symposium last week, July.
Well, and then Teresa, at your the conference, superintendent conference, or that you went to, was that in the summer?
Yeah.
That you were at that. Basically, at that time, they were saying that these transportation changes were tabled, like they weren't going to happen anytime soon. And then some of us went to the SSA forum in August, and there was an uptick of this discussion, and then now they're
Scott
presenting.
spoke,
Yeah.
And then we heard January last week, then we heard July this week. So it's very controversial because of the size of the vehicles. And this is one of those things where we would say, oh, we got to set aside money because we're going to have to pay for this. But you can see the state's paying for it, and no county ever argues when the state's setting aside money.
Right.
So I don't. We'll believe it when we see it.
Yep, so we're not sure. And then just the last part is about, they're saying that this is just the beginning. This is not the fix-all for transportation challenges across the state. They want to look at
Paying for
Uber type
Ubers with the
things,
waiver.
right, yeah, ride sharing, self-directed transportation. I don't know what that would look like, paying a neighbor or something, I don't know, to get to work, I don't know. But anyhow, any questions on waiver transportation?
Okay, this is your little segue. This is fun. This is the new home. So I forgot to tell you in board discussion that we're going to have an open house, private open house. You'll be invited on October 22nd.
Yes.
There's a lunchtime option and a right before our meeting option, or right after our meeting, to see the house. Because we don't want to have a public open house at somebody's home, but we know the commissioners have asked to see it. Rachel would like to see it, the Lodi board, so before the guys move in. So we did go and take pictures. I don't know if they'll let me open. Let's see.
Hey.
It's not gonna be the best, but this is like looking at the open, great room. This is like the kitchen counter, and that goes, to the laundry room, and the backyard is there. There's an alley, and this will be fenced in back here. And then, I took this because the closets are huge. And you can't really see it here, so you'll see, they were laying the floor as we were there, and they have real high ceilings. I mean, it just feels very big, even though it's really square footage wise, not all that big, it feels big.
Yeah.
This is looking from where I just was with the great room into the kitchen. And then that's where the water heater will be. The front doors to the left, down to the bedrooms is that way. Real pretty white 6-panel doors. This is kind of cool. The bar steps down so the guys could eat there, which that would keep us from needing a dining room table to jam it up with furniture. Because one of the things I kind of noticed at NODC with Cameron is that they really don't have a lot of furniture on the suites at NODC. It keeps it open. There's the flooring. It's kind of a wood look, gray laminate. And that's looking into the laundry room. I think you can see the laundry room cupboards there. It is really kind of hard to see. One of the bedrooms there. And I tried to punch the wall. I wouldn't say I punched it hard, but I used my palm and my elbow because, you know, it's supposed to have that reinforced drywall. And Cam hits his head, and I wanted to see, well, with just a normal like this, I really think the drywall's going to hold. So that's kind of looking where we just were in the kitchen. And it's only 1,900 square feet.
Yeah, just under 1900.
But it feels a lot bigger with, you can see how high those ceilings are, all the recessed lighting, the rounded corner tops, all the things we've been telling you about kind of come into life here. So just thought maybe you'd want to see that quickly. Okay, I have one of the things I wanted you to have, there for parents especially, DODD has a lot about supporting you and your family. They have family chats, they have all kinds of things to keep you educated. And one of the things they wanted you to know this year was how to understand the rulemaking process. So if you want to watch this in entirety, it's 27 minutes. You can find it on DOD's website, but I'm going to go to 8 minutes where Jeremiah Wagner on the right is the liaison for the Department for Public Policy, and Stephen Beha on the left. So let's hope we have sound.
So yeah, in Ohio, we have Ohio Revised Code and Ohio Administrative Code, legislative process for statute, and then on the rule side, it doesn't go through legislative process per se. I like to think about it generally in these terms that law is very broad. What the legislator passes is often broad, and then it's left up to the
Sorry, I'm not
departments
going to be able, you guys
to
aren't
make
going
the
to
process.
And this isn't my computer. Anybody see sound?
Do you have on your keyboard the top process about maybe?
Not that I know of.
Must, it's on the map.
Yeah, and I'm not,
Yeah, it should have been down there on
it
the
should
right.
be right here.
Mhm.
That's unfortunate. Were you able to hear it? You probably weren't, were you?
A little bit.
No, let me put it back on then.
What's that?
That's a
No,
microphone
that's a
to
search.
type.
Mhm.
If you're watching, when you watch these live, if you get these advertised, you can type in questions.
Steps along the way, and at what points can families be involved in the process? Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in Ohio, we have Ohio Revised Code and Ohio Administrative Code, legislative process for statutes, and then on the rule side, it doesn't go through legislative process per se. I like to think about it generally how things are going to work for your family, for your loved one. So every rule has to have a public hearing. We take comments. So families are welcome to write into us. They are welcome to come downtown, see us and testify in front of us in a very relaxed environment to kind of give their input. And we absolutely take that in effect as we go through the process.
So how would families find out about what rules are currently in process, which ones are under development? Is there a way for folks to find that out?
Yeah, so right on our homepage of our website, there's a rules and law section, and you can sort them by what's in effect and what's under development. You can sign up to get notices when there's public hearings, and it shows you how to, just all on that page, how to submit that, and I'm sure we can share that link.
Great, great. You said a little bit there's a difference between rules and statute. Rules, the department kind of writes and goes through what you just described, that process. Say a little bit about the statute process. Who initiates it? How does that work if families wanted to get involved?
Right, yeah, so statute-wise, both are law, both have the force of law, but from statute, it's always introduced by a legislative member. So in Iowa, we have House and Senate, and so a member will introduce a bill. The only kind of offshoot of that is the operating budget, which has a lot of our policy and funding initiatives. We, as a administration, develop that, and then the legislator introduces it for us, and then they kind of take it from there. But a bill will start in one chamber, the House or the Senate, receive testimony in committee, which family members are welcome again to write in or come to the State House and testify in person in front of committees. Then it will go through one chamber, then repeat itself in the other chamber, and then off to the governor for signature.
Okay. So say there's not specific legislation that somebody's interested in. They just want to contact their legislative member, whether it be their representative or their senator. How do they do that? And who would they likely be talking to or writing to if they were to do that?
Yeah, so again, through the internet is probably your best bet. Each chamber, the Senate writes, I believe it's ohiosenate.gov and
You guys are
ohiohouse.gov.
good. You can watch that full thing in entirety. I think you know how to contact your legislators, but here's what he was talking about. So you can follow at any point, and there's no rules in making right now. You can sign up to get notified when rules change. There's nothing scheduled for a public hearing when I left today. There was nothing scheduled to be refiled. There was nothing at JCAR. Rules go through a lot of processes. My guess is the first two up will be NMT and vocab, which we just got done talking about. Newly effective dates, there's nothing new. Probably the new administration hasn't even probably had too much this year. I don't think I've seen too many. Maybe some, the SSA rule is under review. I don't think it had anything here, but you can follow all that. So, do you have any questions about? Okay. The last topic then is technology, which I know you had a big one on this last year.
Yeah, just kind of a brief review, and this is just kind of locally where things were last year and then where things are now. So in May of last year, Ohio became a technology first state, just meaning that technology always needs to be considered anytime you're discussing new services for somebody. And even though remote monitoring has actually been around for, I want to say 4 years now, there was a real uptake last year, a lot of focus at the state level on technology and utilizing those supports in service provision. So last year, DOD revised rules around remote monitoring. They changed the language to remote supports. I think a lot of that had to do just with the connotation of monitoring. And then they also separated out assistive technology as a separate waiver service last year. We had a heavy focus last year as well, which you guys have heard about over the past year, but just kind of a recap of what we did. It's in our strategic plan goals to authorize remote support services. We had a local work group where we did a lot of training for SSAs, providers. We revised our assessment that we use for annual planning for folks to include technology. We held that big tech fair, which has been almost a year ago already. I can't believe it. It was very successful. And a lot of discussion was generated in team meetings. We identified sites to consider for this service. But with all of that, we still only had one person authorized for remote supports in 2018. And I don't know, I can't really tell you the reasoning, I guess. I think part of it is families just used to, can't grasp the idea of somebody not being in the home with individuals. In the beginning, we did have some pushback, we felt from the provider community even, which kind of boggled our mind because of the staffing crisis. You would think that would help, this replacing staffing some. But we're continuing at it, and we have continued at it this year. We created a brochure in 2019. All of you have one of those. This is a tool that is used by the SSAs. Anytime somebody through an assessment where it shows that remote supports or technology could be an option for somebody, they will share this with the teams as just some talking points.
So it's from the client side?
Yeah.
That you feel it's not, they're not ready to take the leap?
I think that some would be. I think that some are probably.
We have a lot of group, one of the things Allen has, unlike a lot of counties, is tons of group homes. We have a big group home system. And one of the things that happens is I think people think multiple people together they can't, or one in the home can't. That's one of the blocks, but you think providers haven't been on the front end of it either.
No, they haven't been.
And then weirdly, they lose money. So we don't really know why.
Yep. Yeah. So we're still trying. We asked them, the providers at the provider meeting this month, to identify one site that they're in, and where it could at least be a topic of discussion, where we could talk about, can we do this? I think maybe if we try to break it down more, instead of thinking, okay, we're switching all to remote supports, maybe just a few hours here and there. Maybe we just need to take smaller bites, maybe, I'm not sure.
One of the things that we were gonna do, and I don't know where we are with it, I'll have to ask, but is look at all the homes where the staff never got up and went on awake time. Because then that means those staff never have to get up and attend to people. They probably could go with remote supports, because if they had a problem, the individual would get up and tell the monitor and somebody would attend. And I don't know where we are with that, if we have been able to yet study and then target in on homes, but there's a lot of resistance from families too, who are just very comfortable with somebody being there.
I could see doing that during the day, but at night, I think you would want that human contact with somebody there. I mean, I know when he came and shared all the stuff on remote, it looked fun. I mean, I got cameras all through my house, but still having that support at night.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it, because you would think when individuals are sleeping, they don't need anybody, but then at night is when something goes wrong. Or,
Yeah.
did you talk about Elijah and the
No, I
picture?
haven't got to that yet,
Okay.
but, yeah, I'll talk about Elijah in a second. Let's see, we did just authorize, remote supports for a new gentleman, actually earlier this month, so I'm anxious to see how that works for him. We're part of a pilot for a statewide pilot project for on-site on-call assessment. We have our own that we do and have done for years, but there's one that they're looking to be a statewide assessment, and we were asked to pilot it. I think because we have so much on-site on-call authorized in our county, is why they wanted us to be.
We got picked for bad reason this time.
Yeah, but technology and remote supports are part of that assessment, so I'm hopeful that this 2-month pilot, we can maybe see, okay, are we missing some things? Are there some folks that this assessment is showing could benefit from remote support? So I'm hoping some things come out of that. we're working on some procedures right now for remote supports, with authorizing one of the gentlemen this past year. It's a really involved process. I mean, it's a lot of meeting with a technology vendor and then more meetings and then lots of requirements for the service and having a backup plan identified. And so anyhow, we have guidelines in place now for the SSA staff, but we're kind of formalizing it and putting it into procedures going forward. And then we have, even though, like I said, we just have one remote supports authorized, we have authorized several people with this assistive technology. And I wanted to share what those were because they are pretty neat. There's lots of technology out there that's not, that can just be off-the-shelf technology that can really help people. So one, we have a gal who has an automated medication dispenser, and it notifies her parents through an app on their phone that she's taken her medication. So that's been really useful for that family. The parents know that their daughter's taking her medications. And then two individuals, and Elijah, who's in the brochure, is one of them, has this iPad system, and it allows for two-way communication. He doesn't need ongoing supervision, but he is somebody that he's got some mental health issues, and he will try to frequent the hospital a lot. So this system was put in place, and he is able to access somebody live from a remote support company anytime he feels the need to talk. He can pull up on his iPad. They'll usually be able to talk him through any concerns or issues that he's having, and then they also can do a couple well checks on him through this iPad system. So he and another gal who live at R&R Apartments actually have this service in
And this
place.
would be a good time for you to say what you wanted to share about Angel Sense.
So it's a device that we put on Jada. It attaches to her clothing and can't be removed except by a key that James and I have. And it's GPS technology, but it also, I could listen in if I need to where she's at, or I can communicate with her two ways through it. But it will tell me, like just now, it just sent me a message that said she's back at home. But I get alerts through an app or on my watch or an email if she's not somewhere that I've defined. I was thinking about the little boy that left the house over the summer, that when he would have left, if he would have had that on, it would have alerted his family that he had left the house. It's very precise. Like I can set the parameters for her school, for her doctor, everything like that. And so it's pretty instantaneous that if she's not somewhere that, well, even when she goes somewhere that we have defined, it'll say, okay, Jada just got home from school, or Jada arrived at the doctor. But it's only about as big as like an old pager, and it charges up pretty quickly for a full charge that she could wear it all through the night and the day, and then I can just charge it a little bit at home. So it's peace of mind. She isn't to the point where she's completely an eloper, but she isn't afraid of exploring without, she doesn't have any fear of leaving. So it's in this piece of fabric that right now, the way we're using it, there's these two pins that are magnetic, that the only key that can open it is the one that we have at home. But we just bought her the belt because my thought was, well, if somebody kidnaps her, they're just going to take her pants off. But it has a belt also that you can put right around her waist, not through the loops of the clothing, that can't be cut, and the device can be right in the belt. So
And she can't remove it?
she can't remove it.
The one thing, that's cell phone based.
Yes.
So one of the things we talked about is that the board, like we just kind of go through these debates, are in here all the time. We've never bought cell phones before. It's always been our policy not to. But when I took an ISS revision last month, I added devices. We would buy the bases without saying we'll buy cell phones, but we are buying cell phones if they're the base to a device now. But families still would have their data plans and kind of all that kind of stuff. I have heard that's a little complicated for some families. I think there's some, I can't remember if that family you mentioned had one and just didn't have it defined right. I know they had the Project Lifesaver.
Yeah, they had that.
So the Project Lifesaver is another one that goes through the sheriff's department. So when a child leaves outside of defined areas, the sheriff's department's notified. But this one is more family controlled. We just have to make sure families are using it and setting up. You and James are probably you're probably really good
I
at
am.
that thing. Okay, you're way good at that. And so some of the families, we just need to make sure they have somebody to help them get those parameters defined and
It's pretty user friendly. I mean,
good.
as soon as I charged it up and downloaded the app on my phone, it walked me right through
Good.
everything, so,
That's good to know.
yeah. And you can't like I was like, well, what if I lose this key? You can't reorder anything unless you can prove that you are defined to that account. So it's,
So this seems not even so much about her wandering or eloping, but really for trafficking and all other kinds
oh,
of
yeah.
worries that people have. I mean,
well, a
that's-
bunch of people that I've talked to about it that don't have a child with special needs are like, I would like this to put on my teenager. I was like, well,
They're
sure
called
that's-
wrist ankles.
Yeah, but no kidding. What about,
Ankle
like as a
bracelets.
way,
You'll
a
be-
type of discipline for when you get in trouble for drug use or something in high school? I mean, there certainly is
Yeah.
use, but
And we've only had it for a couple months, but it's been a nice peace of mind for us. And I think as she gets older, it'll probably be even a lot more useful. But
and do you remember how much your budget that took to buy?
so the device itself was around $2 something, although I just saw that you could get it for a lot less, right? Like this back to school deal. But then there's a monthly expense that's about $30 a month.
Okay, because we were talking about the changes in like that individual support program being able to help Chrissy and James get that for Jana, or for Jada. Was there anything else on your?
No, I don't think so, but just, there's lots of really cool
Since you're told it.
technology
A sensory
gadgets out
toilet?
there.
Yeah, that's so good luck.
Automatic flushing. No touch.
Oh, the brochure.
Every, actually,
Yeah.
every home needs one of those, right, Phyllis?
Yeah.
Yeah.